Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls and people. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Well, everyone's a special guest. I'm joined by my former work wife. I guess, it was so short that I would say it was an annulment rather than a full divorce. But she's doing big things in regards to medicine and health and all those great things. And so I wanted to have her on the podcast. So I'm joined by Miss Kim Bellamy. I was about to get your name wrong. I don't know why. I got nervous on my own podcast.
Listen.
But, yeah, I don't know. I just, it's late. I definitely really appreciate this. This is a special episode for me. So I think, before we get into it, I think this episode, is about your journey working through grief and some of the lessons you learned, which I think is very timely to this time, I guess with grief and what's going on and working and just a whole bunch of, I guess, still pandemic-ish life. We're not out of it completely. But before we get into that, Kim, do a little introduction of who you are that I left out besides being my former work wife.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the show tonight. And also thank you for calling me out on being your former work wife. Lifelong friends, but Phil likes to throw in my face that I left our last place of employment shortly after he got there. But that didn't change us remaining friends past that. We still hold each other down, hit each other up for advice, and just a real good support system one another. So wanted to start there, address that. So quick introduction of myself. As Phil mentioned, my name is Kim Bellamy. I am a native of North Carolina, born and raised. I have been in the DMV area with emphasis on the V for the last 6 years now. So Northern Virginia, DMV area is definitely becoming a second home for me. Let me see. I went to East Carolina University for undergrad, studied journalism, worked as an education reporter for a very short period of time. Well, 2 years. I guess it's not that short, but at a small community newspaper. By me working on education-related stories, that kind of led into me wanting to pursue the current career path that I'm on now, which is higher education. When I worked in higher ed, I would say, I'm gonna age myself. I've had higher ed related positions for the past 11 years now.
Yeah, I think you might get me, honestly. I would call my grad school 2010. No, I think we're 11, so we're both tied.
Yeah. Oh, well, it might be 12 then, because my first higher position was 2009.
Oh, yeah, okay. Just a little bit. You got 1 year on me.
Just a little bit. So that's crazy to think about that I've been in the field that long, but it has been definitely very rewarding. I've worked in a range of, different areas, including advising, academic support, career advising, and now I work in equity, diversity, and inclusion at a medical association. So I kind of transitioned from the traditional higher ed role, working on a college campus, to working for association now, but doing some really good work that provides me with a lot of joy and fulfillment during my career. I guess some personal things, I would consider myself an old soul. I collect vinyls. I love old music. Oftentimes feel like I was born in the wrong era or decade. Find a lot of joy in helping people and supporting others, which I kind of expressed through like my career journey. And I think that's about it. A lot of layers to myself, but still discovering as I go. But that's the basic overview of me.
I love it. That was a great overview. And I think that kind of goes in to our first question, which I believe is, your journey about working through grief, because it kind of started, when you correlated with your first job out of grad school in 2012. So, take us through that journey and what you mean by, like, you've kind of had to work through grief for every single position you've been working through, professionally since 2012.
Yeah. I guess to detail it back to, I think my first experience with grief in which I was able to actually identify what it was like you said, me finishing up my graduate program, me being on the job hunt and trying to figure out where I wanted to start my career. And having the opportunity and the blessing to be presented with two different job offers around the same time, and just really praying around trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go in. Because one position was definitely a lot further from home, much further than I've ever lived from home. It was 6+ hours away. I'm a big family person, so that was going to be quite an adjustment for me. It was also in an area that I wasn't super familiar with in the mountains of North Carolina. So like more in the Appalachian area. So that was definitely going to be a big adjustment. And the other position I was offered was like 45 minutes away from where I grew up. Similar roles, similar positions, but just the dynamic of the institutions were very different. The student population I was going to be working with was very different. So I was struggling a bit with trying to figure out which direction I should move in. So I mentioned that I prayed about it and I did a whole pros and cons list to try to figure out which position was going to be the right fit for me. And after going through that list, after praying about it, I felt like I was led to the position that was closer to home, although I was like, oh, this is going to give me the same type of feel in terms of the environment. And it was a smaller institution. Somehow in my head, I was thinking that a smaller institution was going to mean my experience wasn't going to be as rich for some reason. And I was completely wrong. I'm so glad I took the position I did. But when I was trying to evaluate those two positions, I remember after I made the decision, I called my mom, and she didn't want to have any influence on which job that I took, which I appreciated. But as soon as I told her, she was like, oh man, I'm so glad that you made that decision. I was going to support you either way, no matter where you decided to go. But I'm so glad you took the position closer to home. And I was asking her why. And she shared with me that my dad had just recently been diagnosed with cancer. So then it became very clear why I felt so led to go to that particular institution. Finding out that news was a shock for me. I had to figure out how I was going to best process that, what that was going to look like, returning back home, but also, not just going to start a new role, but also going to support my family and being able to take my dad to different appointments he needed, and making sure that, he had food at different times or just had someone to talk to. So I was going to be taking on a lot more things than what I was used to. Transitioning from finding that news out, starting my position, I was a new professional in my role, and it was putting a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that I was, making sure that I was presenting in a way that I was meeting their expectations and performing at a high level, and really just setting the bar very high for myself. And initially not sharing what I was going through personally with like my supervisor and my coworkers. I was just still getting to know them. They were still getting to know me. And I have always been a person where I try not to put any burdens I might be experiencing on others. So I was trying to do that within that time, but it got to a point where I just had to let it all out and share. And that was something that was pretty uncomfortable for me because I'm not typically a person that like cries or shows a ton of emotion. But it got to a point where by me, I think masking what I was going through and trying to put on this face of, oh, I'm fine, like I'm working through everything great, that I was actually doing more harm and damage to myself by not sharing and not being upfront with that information. And when I actually shared that with my supervisor, she was super supportive. I believe that was the first time I cried in a colleague's office. Yeah, I very much so appreciate the level of support I was able to receive once I was able to share what I was going through. And that same supervisor and coworkers that I did develop close relationships really ended up stepping up and supporting me throughout my time as I was trying to figure out how to best be there and show up for my dad and my mom, my sister during that time. So that's kind of where I've got like my first lessons in grief and I guess going through various different stages of it in terms of like denial and having like a little bit of anger, like why are we experiencing this, that type of thing. And then getting to a place where I was able to figure out how I was going to navigate that a bit better and let people in to a certain degree. So I guess that was my early stage of experience that. And as I went further in to my career and transitioned to the role I had after leaving that institution, which was at George Mason, that's actually the institution in which my dad passed away like a couple years after I got there. And I kind of went through the same things of like not wanting to share fully in the beginning. Again, trying to kind of make sure that I was painting this picture of that I'm professional regardless, no matter what comes my way, I'm going to be able to handle it. Don't worry about me. And then getting to a point where things got a little too real, in which I actually had to share. And the same occurrence happened where once I did share, the colleagues that I had were super supportive and were there for me, both during the time where I was trying to then provide support at a distance because I had moved further away. Not as far, not 6 hours like the first position I had an opportunity to go to, but I was about 3 hours, 45 minutes to about 4 hours away. So trying to figure out how to navigate showing support to my family from a distance to then going to this or transitioning to this period where I no longer have my dad, that he, has now transitioned, passed on, and figuring out what does life mean for me after that. So.
But, I think that, I took some notes. One of the things I wanted to speak to was you said it took many different forms and you went through some of those stages. Can you explain just some concrete examples of those forms for you? I know you said denial. I know you said anger, maybe just some more examples of such.
Yeah. So it's interesting during the time period that I'm describing, I'm able to label and identify it now because I have now been exposed to what those stages of grief are. I've also done some self-work related to that. I have been blessed with a therapist that has been able to talk me through different things and really share with me what I'm experiencing, when I'm experiencing, because I know during those times, I didn't know how to identify what I was going through. And I think that was probably one of the scariest pieces for me because I knew I was feeling sadness. I knew I was feeling confusion. I knew that I was trying to redirect my attention other places, but not really able to pinpoint what I was doing in the moment. As a result of me establishing a really solid relationship with a wonderful therapist, That's when I actually learned more about the grief process. I started seeing her about a year ago. I started seeing her last May as a result of me feeling just overwhelming sadness last April. And it's interesting because last year I was experiencing grief, but a very different type of grief. And I was also in this stage where I'm like, what the heck is going on with me? I would, be working through things in terms of like work projects, and then I'll just bust out crying out of nowhere. Or I would go from one day of me feeling like pretty good, pretty happy, like, oh, I can, get through whatever I'm going through. And the next day I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. And, for context, I'm saying a year ago, but for context, last April was like a month post everything shutting down. And I went from this period of putting my normal positive spin on things of like, oh, I'm going to be working from home, so I'll have more time to do X, Y, and Z, whether that's exercising or reading or doing this, that, and the third. And it was like every time someone brought up, I guess, a negative aspect to the pandemic in those early stages, I was always trying to frame it and put it in a positive light and really share like the good that was happening as a result of it. And then I think it just like hit me that like, not only is there some good from this, but there is also a lot of bad that is happening and that can occur. And I think as the days went on, I just built up this bigger sense of fear in terms of how do I navigate through life at this point and make sure that I'm remaining healthy, that my family members are remaining healthy. I was heavily plugged into the news then, which isn't like me. I try to like separate myself from watching the news so much. But at the time I was watching all the time, and I was seeing the number of COVID cases increasing, the number of deaths increasing. And I don't know if last April, I think a little bit later, some months later, I actually started to have some like friends or family members who had someone that may have like passed away from COVID and that type of thing. But the more and more that built up, the more it was impacting my mood and my mental health. So I knew I needed to do something because it wasn't like me to just like break down crying out of nowhere. I'm not even a person that cries that often, which I am becoming more comfortable with now. But at that time I was like, oh no, we got to fix this. So, once I started working with that therapist, we started talking about that. And she was able to help me pinpoint that what I was feeling during that time was me actually grieving what life was prior to the pandemic. So me grieving having to work in a very different way than what I did before, completely remote, which was a shocker to me because I'm actually more on the introverted side. I'm a social introvert. So the fact that I was like having a bit difficulty adjusting to working from home was very interesting, but also me grieving the fact that I wasn't able to just run down to North Carolina to see my family when I wanted to. And if I did go, it was all of this preparation work that needed to take place in terms of, okay, I'm going to get a COVID test. My family is going to get a COVID test. Once I get there, me having a fear to embrace them and hug them. So like grieving that personal connection and touch. Me grieving being able to gather with friends. That's where the social side of me comes in because I'm very much so a person that loves to connect with friends, whether it's like us going to a concert together or just having dinner, and then having to transition to completely just FaceTime and Zoom. And I'm already on Zoom all day for work. So like just me getting burnt out in all of these different aspects was definitely impacting me. And like I said, just that overall fear of like, how do I make sure that I'm remaining healthy during this time? So she was able to help me see that I was grieving those things And we covered that in addition to me still processing the grief of the loss of my father as well. And she shared a podcast with me by Brene Brown that was on grief. And on that particular episode, she invited a gentleman named David Kessler, who introduced a 6-stage of grief. So I hope I can remember all of these stages, but I've talked about a couple of them, but and I'm blanking on her name, but someone else created the first 5 stages, and he ended up becoming a mentee of this woman, and they worked together, and then he created the 6th stage. But the first 5 are denial, anger, depression, acceptance, and then he also added on meaning. And what I realized through listening to that particular episode, through working through my therapist, is that one, there isn't a expiration date to grief. So the fact that we still had to go back and help me work through grieving the loss of my father, grieving the loss of other family members as well. It just helped put in perspective for me why I would struggle at different periods, like different times of the year, different things would come up. I would just feel more sadness than what I typically did. But also it helped me realize that everyone doesn't experience all of those stages either. So I think the ones that I have pinpointed were some of the more prominent ones for me. I think definitely I've gone through like some periods of like depression, the acceptance piece I'm still like kind of working through, because it's hard to like accept the loss of your loved one, but it's also like the acceptance of how am I navigating life even with their, like, in spite of their loss as well. So yeah, there are a lot of complexities to these different stages of grief, but it helped me realize that my grief is unique to myself, and I'm processing that in a way that makes sense to me, and that I shouldn't rush myself to get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm better now. Like I'm able to function without maybe revisiting one of those cycles or stages, or without feeling sadness again, because there are definitely days where, you know, I feel like I revisit some of those same emotions all over again, and I'm crying, but it doesn't last always, and I'm able to like bounce back from that. So.
I was thinking, one of the things I was thinking about is that you're a high achiever, and you know, I know you are. You're high achieving, even my own podcast. Do you feel like your high achievement and you're throwing yourself into work was part of your grief? Like, is that a way to, like, I guess, kind of go along with denial, or you're just a high achiever, or, you know, just explain that, because I think you spoke to it a little bit. Like, you were high achieving in your first grad school position. I know you were high achieving at Mason when we worked together. And so with that high achievement that you have, it also could be like the way to, like, I don't know, become like not a crutch, but you meant like a standard. So then how do you mix that high achievement with just showing up as your full self, but also showing up and allowing yourself to grieve adequately? Like I can't do this paper, or whatever you need to do. Like, how do you balance that high achievement and grief?
Yeah. Well, one, thank you for saying that. As someone that personally knows me, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I do set a high bar for myself. I can admit that I'm probably my own worst critic. I tend to overthink and overanalyze things, and I'm working through that. And I think by me having that level of self-awareness about the way that I do, you know, set these expectations for myself, it also helps me with kind of checking myself at different times too, and me figuring out whether or not those expectations are realistic, and if I am in fact probably the only one who has those same expectations. So you asked if within, any of my like professional roles, if I use that sense of like high achievement as a way to like cope or balance my grief. And I would definitely say yes. I try to throw myself into work to redirect my attention to kind of hide from the reality of what was going on. But I also viewed my work in a way that like I can't show that I'm struggling right now. I can't show that I'm feeling weak right now, because those that I work with are going to judge me, and they're not going to feel like I am as a high of a performer, or I won't be able to get the same level of projects that I had before, or, maybe they're not going to trust me in the same way for the next task that I'm presented with, or the next opportunity. And honestly, my thinking at that time was completely off, and it wasn't accurate. I shared that when I was able to present how I actually was feeling and share what was going on, that I was met with so much support and understanding and empathy, that I realized that I needed to do some adjustments within my own thinking, because that was contributing to the level of stress and anxiety that I was feeling. I was putting way more on myself than needed to be. And I needed to just allow others to show up for me, which felt very uncomfortable for me, because I have been a person that have been, my approach has been, which I said earlier, I don't want to burden someone or put my struggle, sadness, that type of thing on someone else. They, like, everyone else has enough going on. I don't want them to be worried with that. So I've done that in the past. I have, I've been someone that has just wanted to tackle the world by myself. And I realized that everyone needs community and they need support. And there is no way that we are going to make it through what we're currently, facing now, is we're trying to transition out of the pandemic without continuing to rely on one another for support. But there was also no way that I was going to be able to really get to a place where I felt whole without being my full self. So I had to share more. I had to be more open and honest about how I was feeling on different days. I remember particularly after I came back to work far too soon after my my dad passed away, and that was still me thinking like, oh, I need to get back to work. I need to get back in there. And now I'm like, for what? Like, I only took 2 weeks, and within that 2 weeks, the first week was spent me getting all the arrangements together for my dad's service, and then the next week was really like me kind of recouping from all of that had just occurred. And then the next week was like, all right, I need to go back to work. But part of it was like, I didn't want to sit in those emotions and feelings. I just didn't. So I rushed back to work. So, but when I got back, I remember there was like a influx of people asking how I was doing and what can they do. And it was a lot. It was overwhelming. But I realized within that, and knowing that I wasn't okay, that I had to begin sharing that, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to just jump back into doing student appointments. I wasn't going to be able to just jump back into contributing during staff meetings and that type of thing without saying, like, I'm not doing well today. I'm sad. I'm not feeling well. And I think it was an adjustment for others too, because I think so often when you're asking someone, how are you doing? Like, what's going on with you? We don't necessarily expect them to like fully share everything, right? Like it throws people off a little bit.
Yeah. Have you ever asked someone like how they're doing? And I'm like, I'm awful. And then you just look at them like, okay, like it throws you off, right?
Yeah. But like when when they do share, they're sharing that for a reason, right? So like they're being very transparent. They're providing a certain level of vulnerability, and either one, they trust you with that information, or two, they're doing it for themselves, right? Like they might be sharing that with you because they trust you that information, they feel like you can help, or they're doing it for themselves because they just need to be open and honest with what they're feeling and who they are within that moment. So I started doing the same. When people asked me how I was doing, I was upfront and told them that, I'm not well today. I'm sad. I'm still working through this. And, I got a mix of different reactions from that. Some people, asked more of like, how can I further support you? Other people, if they didn't know what to do in the moment, they found a way later to show they they cared and had that level of support. And some people were just like, okay, like like, because also I shouldn't expect everyone to be able to provide that that exemplary status of support, right? Like everyone doesn't have the capacity to do that, nor does everyone want to do that, because people are going through their own things too. So, it was just me realizing that I didn't need to hide those emotions anymore, and really leaving it up to those who I shared it with, how they wanted to deal with that. It wasn't my responsibility to tell them how to support me. They had to figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things I will add because I asked another question is sometimes it's very hard though, because someone says, what can I do for you? And like, sometimes you want to be like, can you just randomly do something? Just do it. Just like randomly drop off a meal or randomly just act. I don't need because almost honestly, sometimes it's more work for you to dictate what someone else can do for you. So, but I think you also said it, capacity, like some people just don't know.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird mixture of like, do I explicitly say, how can I help you? Well, matter of fact, you can leave me a meal, you know what I'm saying? Like cook meals for me. Or is it like anything will help and you just leave it kind of vague? So I don't know. I mean, that wasn't really kind of a statement, but what was some of the things that you did? Like, did you say explicitly, like, how can I help? And you said, I need you to cover my appointments. Did you like straight up say stuff, or you left it in that gray zone?
I definitely left it in the gray zone, because so the thing with it is like when someone is experiencing a loss, whether it be the loss of a friend or family member, the loss of a job or position, loss can take many different forms, right? We don't always know what we need in that moment. So when people would ask me, is there anything I can do? How can I support you? One, I would share like, thank you for your concern and thank you for being willing to support me. A lot of times I would tell them like, if they're a praying person, pray for me, like do show up in that way. But I didn't necessarily know how to pinpoint what I needed at the time, because I was still trying to figure out how I could navigate that myself. So because I was still trying to figure out like how I can best support myself, I wasn't at the point of figuring out how others could best support me. But like I said, people found their way to show up for me in ways that I didn't expect at various times and showed they cared. And I've tried to do the same thing moving forward as I've had friends who've experienced various different types of losses. I no longer ask those questions. I just kind of let it be known through my actions. So there have been friends where they've lost a parent or a family member, that type of thing. And I have showed that, I'm there to support them by getting them like a gift that I know that they would really appreciate, something that uplift their spirits, or just simply showing up for them, like physically showing up for them, and not necessarily asking questions of like, how are you doing? Like none of the questions that I feel like is gonna maybe lead them into like more sadness, but just literally trying to be there for them and getting them to the point where they can laugh or smile or that type of thing. And if they don't want to laugh or smile, I'm there to just listen. And I found that that's a lot of times enough. Yeah, a lot of times that's been enough. But I've been amazed at like how people have found different ways to like show they care. Without me stating, what I need. And a lot of times it's exactly what I needed and I just didn't know, and they were able to figure that out. So,
well, I just want to go back to like the micro, the macro. One of the things I found that you were in preparation for this episode is that you say that it's overall like we're overall a societal, we're going through a societal grief, and that that through this grieving process, similar to you, you're a different person, you're transformed. So can you speak to like maybe that micro and macro, like how you've been kind of changed through this, and then how you feel the society or whatever community is going to be different and through this grief?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because we've all experienced grief within this past year. Like I haven't met not one person that hasn't been impacted by the pandemic in some way, whether that has been a job loss, someone being furloughed, them just transitioning to a new way of doing their work, them knowing someone that has contracted COVID, getting COVID themselves, or experiencing the loss of a loved one. Like we've all experienced loss related to this pandemic and experienced grief. Like even with like the interactions that we've had with one another over this past year, like grieving, like I mentioned earlier, grieving that physical touch, grieving the ability to like actually come together in a way that makes sense. And now we're at a point where, things are starting to open up, like outside is air quotes open, at this point. The CDC is now saying like, if you're fully vaccinated, you can go out without a mask and all these things. So like, I think people are starting to experience some level of hope and optimism about the future. But in a way, I feel like things are never fully going to be what they were, right? So we'll still have some level of grieving because it's not going to be the world in which we knew it in 2019 or 2018 or the years prior. And I think with that, we need to kind of figure out how do we process that, and how do we depend on one another for support as we're all experiencing the same level of pivoting and transitioning. I don't really like the term new normal, but like, yeah, I don't like the term new normal, but definitely transitioning to a state in which we haven't been before, and going from there. In terms of, I guess, the macro level that you asked about, in terms of how I've been changed by just like experiencing grief and being able to finally identify it and know what I've previously gone through and to some extent still going through. I think how I've changed, related to that, is just one, having more self-awareness. Two, I believe that I am more open and honest with my emotions and what I'm feeling, and knowing that it's okay to truly focus on self-care. And that's what I want. That's what my hope is for everyone, moving forward, as we do get to this new state of life that we're in, right? Because yes, we're, fingers crossed, prayers up, we're coming out of this pandemic, right? But there are going to be other things that occur. This isn't the last major hit we're going to experience, and there are going to be other things that are going to deeply impact us, and us getting to a point where we're truly focusing on what's the best for self, opposed to evaluate, coming from this lens of like, how are others going to view me? I have to, give into like this hustle culture, and I have to keep going, and I need to perform at this level, so everyone can see that I'm grinding, I'm doing all of this. Like, that's not what's most important. What's most important are like, are you well, holistically? Like, are you able to say like, I'm good, I'm taking care of self, I'm experiencing joy. And the reason I think why that's coming up for me is that I know that I've realized that over time, and this definitely has just been within the past, I would say, year and a half or so, that I've become more comfortable with taking days off, having those mental health days, and marking it on my timesheet as a mental health day, and being open with my supervisor, those I'm working with. They're like, hey, it's just a lot going on right now, and I need to step back from this. For whatever reason, I would just like, hold tight to all of my leave time like it was some type of like golden nugget or prize or whatever. And sometimes get in a situation where I'm like, oh dang, now I'm about to lose my leave because I haven't I haven't used it at this point. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, no, it's mine. I earned it, and I need to make sure I'm using it so I can be my best self, and I can perform, at a level in which, not only am, I'm satisfied with, but the partners and different things that I work with, also can be proud of as well. Um, I, yeah, I'm just very blown away by like, despite all of the things that happened over this past year, people still felt like they had to like start a new business or do this new venture. And the like I had I know for sure I had a few coworkers where I know that they experienced some losses, and I won't go into specific about what those were, but like they took time off, but it was like a very short time period. And I was like, whoa, like, why are they already back at work right now? Like being able to just truly say like, this work will be here when I get back, and it'll be fine. And that's why we have an organization of, X amount of employees, because they should be able to, help pick up and be able to support one another as that comes along. So I think for me at a macro, micro level, and then at a macro level for everyone, I'm just hoping that self-care becomes more of not just a buzzword and catchphrase, and not just me like going to the spa and doing all these different things, but like you're truly taking care of yourself, and being honest about how you need to take care of yourself.
I mean, I think it's very triggering because one, I'm about to like, I didn't use all my leave. You know what I'm saying? Like, and
Phil,
I feel like, like I
I
should.
need you to do better,
I need to do
man.
better. I like literally got an email. I was like, you're about to lose all this. And I was like, ugh. So that's one. And two, like, I still do like even in my out of office, I'm still checking my emails, which is, I don't know. It's just I'm scared to come back to an inbox of craziness. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
and
so
even with that,
that's triggering.
like,
It's triggering.
yeah, even with that, like, making sure when you are taking time off that you're not checking your email, even if you have to delete the Outlook app just for that short time
Wow.
period and then
Yeah.
download it again. If that's going to give you some sense of peace, then do that. Um, uh, Something that I've picked up and I need to do better about, but one of my colleagues now has the best away messages, and it's always something that is very, I feel like it's pretty direct in terms of how they're spending their time away from the office. So whether it's like going to celebrate the union of a couple at a wedding, or taking a mental health day, they're pretty direct in how they're using that time, which I think is great. Instead of just saying I'm offline today or whatever,
Mm.
saying what that is. And then it always has like some reflective piece as well, but there's like a quote or some resource they can go to. And I think doing those little things, to not only share with others of this is how I'm taking care of myself, but also I feel like that helps encourage others to do the same. I think that's a good tool and tip. But I'm guilty to doing the same things in terms of checking my email while I'm away. Like I may take the day off, but I'm still like strolling through to see what's about to pop up. So when I come back, I'm not like super overwhelmed with what I have to conquer when I come back. But
I mean, I actually even got checked one time. Tracy emailed me, and I emailed her back, and she's like, "No, that was just for you to know for later. Why are you emailing me back?" I was like,
yep.
"I don't
And
know, sorry."
yeah. And the same thing has happened to me. I don't know if Tracy's done it. So Tracy's your current supervisor, my previous supervisor, but I don't know if Tracy has done that with me, but my current supervisor has definitely done that. So she has now stopped sending me emails when I'm taking time off because she knows that I'll reply. And she was like, I thought you asked for the day off. And I was like, I did, but I just wanted to make sure that this was addressed. She was like, it can wait. So, like I said, it's still a work in progress, and I'm still, getting to a point where I'm fully able to commit to true, self care and making sure that I'm taking those periods, and we're in which I'm just, focusing on myself and making sure that I'm getting away from the hustle and bustle, but I'm getting there slowly but surely.
I think one thing I want to mention before we go into our shot for shot segment is I just want to ask you a question. You said one of the lessons that you learned, I think that was very helpful, that I don't want to not get on this episode, is that uh, this is the time, like during your grieving time, this is your time to be your authentic self at work. And so I really would love for you, I know you spoke a little bit about that, but I would love for you to revisit that aspect because that really spoke to me. I mean, not only through being authentic in general, but probably authentic during a time of grieving. It's probably specific. So I want to talk about that. What lessons and what can you share with others to that point?
Yeah. So being your authentic self, that's another one, just like self-care, where I feel like it's very much so like on trend right now, and the kind of like a buzzword, catchphrase that I hear a lot. And I think with both of those is it's interesting because you kind of have to figure out to what extent are people prepared, for you to be your most authentic self, and then for you to also figure out, or evaluate to what extent do you care if they're prepared or not, right? Like
Yeah, okay. I was about to say.
to
I was about to say.
to yeah, to like to some extent it's like you want to be your authentic self, but
Yeah.
then at the same time, it's like, how are people going to perceive that? And is that going to impact relationships in some way? And if it does, that could be telling as well, right? So,
Yeah.
for me, in terms of being my authentic self as it relates to grief, is what I, alluded to earlier. It was just making sure that um, that I'm not trying to mask um, my feelings, that I'm not trying to mask my emotions. I'm not trying to paint this picture of like everything's great and excellent and grand, and I could take on this and I can volunteer for that, and everything will be good, because that's not always the case. Being able to say like, I can maybe take on this but not this, because like my capacity just isn't there right now.
Mm.
um, and it takes a certain level of trust to get to that point, like being able to share that level of detail with someone. It definitely takes, having a good relationship with those in which you're sharing that information with. But at the end of the day, I think you have to do what's going to be best for you, right? So um, I think just doing kind of a analysis, me going back to like a pros and cons thing.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Uh,
do you have like a I call it my tribe, like a vetting system. You know what I'm saying? Like I let people show up and show me who they are, and then I take note. I'd be like, all right, cool. Like no shade or nothing, but like I know based on a little bit of a nugget I gave you that you could be my people or not, and not everyone's
yeah,
your people. So maybe even in that time, like I always say, like in grief or goodness or sadness or really hard times, I call my hard times my people filter,
mm,
because like
mm,
usually hard times filter out people.
yeah,
Like very difficult times, people show up, and let me phrase, the people that don't show up, there's no love loss. They, like you said, they maybe have things going on for them, but I feel more connected to
hmm,
the people that do show up, if that makes sense. Like I don't like want to shade them or be petty, but also I have more of an appreciation. Like it increases the appreciation for my people that show up, if that makes sense.
absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. Um, and what you just spoke to is kind of like the process that I was going through um, in those earlier stages that I was talking about when I, was, in the early stages of my career in higher ed. And I mentioned earlier that I was still getting to know my colleagues and still developing friendships. So I was kind of vetting people before I shared anything, and making sure that what I did share would be received well, or like they would at least hear me. Not necessarily going with the expectation that they would know how to help me or how to support me, but I at least knew that they would be able to hear me and it would be received well. So yeah, I did do kind of a vetting process with my colleagues at both of the schools that I mentioned, and I think like people will let you know if they're for you. They It could be simple things where they're just making sure they keep in touch with you and keep in contact with you. They're checking in. Um, it may be that they are looking for different opportunities for you in which they know that you would benefit, and those types of things. Like just taking notice of like very small things that people are doing can be like a good indicator of if whether or not they're going to be a good person for you to take that next step and say like, I also want to share this with you as well. um, but like you said, like never going into it with the expectation of um, that everyone should be able to hold space for you or show it for you, because I don't think that's fair, on their part. So
Right. Well, I think that was great. I think that was a great point to lead into our next segment. Thank you so much for sharing so much, and definitely drop some gems there. So now it's not really a surprise. You've been a loyal listener of the podcast and all that stuff. So we know the segment coming up is shot for shot. Do you want to go first? I'll go first. I know that you probably even prepared now for this shot. Maybe, I don't know.
I will let you go first as the host of the show.
All right. So I'm just gonna ask. I'm gonna ask the same. All like I know you musically. Let's do this. A real deal. Like I want to see this person. Post pandemic. I don't care how much the tickets cost. I'm going to see them live. That's one. And then two, if I can go back in a time machine and go see someone else in the past. So I want to know, who would you want to see right now, post pandemic? I want to be right there in the live concert. And then two, I go into a time machine and I want to see this person in the past.
Okay. So the past is easy because I feel like most of the music I listen to are from yesteryear. Yeah, the past is pretty easy. I would want to see Marvin Gaye. I would want to see Michael Jackson, Donny Hathaway, Aaliyah, because that was my girl. I felt like we were sisters. I used to wear my hair like hers in my high school years with the little swoop to the side. I would be in front of the TV, like practicing all of her dance moves and everything. So, she had a very short career, but within those 7-8 years that she was, performing, I would have loved to see her. And to round it out with another female, I'm going to say Amy Winehouse when she was like in her prime.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like when
that's quite the festival, the post-past Kim. I'd pay to see that festival, honestly.
Yeah. I did so many for past. Now I have to think of like a present day person I want to see.
Yeah, man, you gotta do like one big headliner for the present day. Like, honestly, this would be the dope concert. It'd be like past meets present, all these past people into just one present person.
And the one present person.
Okay, maybe two or three present people.
Okay. Who am I listening to heavily right now?
Now, mind you, this is, just looking at your list already. I wrote it down: Aaliyah, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, Donny. I mean, it's kind of popish.
It is
R&B-ish, so it's not a rap. It's not a rap concert. So maybe keeping the theme, it might be like more of a R&B act or pop act. I don't know if you want to just throw this all off and put 2 Chainz or Lil Baby. I don't know. That might.
Now I do love some 2 Chainz, so
I love him too. But I don't think he would match this concert.
He wouldn't really mesh well. Okay. And it's funny you said don't throw a rap artist in there, because the first person I thought about was like the person that I have in heavy rotation right now, which is J. Cole. I'm listening to his new album.
Never mind. Take that back. I'm a J. Cole stan, so forget it. He's on. He could be on there. like he on there.
Yeah. So he would definitely be on there. I've already seen Kendrick once before, but I would definitely add him to the list. So now I'm just going into all of my favorite rap artists right now. So my top 3 right now are J. Cole, Kendrick, and Big Sean. So those are my 3 rap artists. And then if I had to do like some R&B artists that I haven't seen, because I've seen all of those artists before, so I just want to see them again. Artists I haven't seen that's more in line with the more soul R&B. I would love to see Toni Braxton. I haven't seen her. I just mentioned by saying her, I just realized I would love to see her, the artist her, because she's super dope. And Mariah Carey, if it's a good night for her. My girl can be a little shaky.
She might come out on stage.
But I love me some Mariah. Me and Mariah, we go back like babies and pacifiers. Yeah. So that will round out my list. So
That is quite a show. Actually, I feel like I should make a playlist. That is probably be very expensive and have those people. Some of those people might not show up or throw a fit. That'd be a lot of big personalities to handle. Shout out to I'm gonna call it the Kim Past and Present Festival.
yes.
I actually might make that a real playlist and call it that and send it to you.
It'll be an interesting playlist for sure.
All right. Yours for me. Your question for me.
My question for you, okay, so we talked a lot about transitioning to life post-pandemic. What's the top 3 things that you want to do now that we're starting to come out on the other side of this? And things that you haven't done before? Like, what are some new things that you want to do at this point?
New thing. Well, I want to do like a big, huge barbecue.
Okay. You've never hosted a barbecue?
Not in a new house that I'm about to buy, but
and congrats on that. Congratulations.
But I would say no. I thought you meant like just what I'm looking. Oh, so this be new things. Okay, new activities. Post-pandemic new activities. I want to travel to Maine. I've never been to Maine.
Okay.
What else? These are probably all locations. So I need to think of an activity. I actually never taken a water taxi from, the water taxi that picks you up in Alexandria.
Yeah.
It takes you to National Harbor not National Harbor, but takes you to to watch the Nationals play baseball.
Yeah.
I never did that, and I literally always wanted to do it, just never did it.
I haven't done that either. I think I might add that to my list.
Yeah, I was about to say like it just literally it's the same thing. You could drive to a Nationals game, but I'd rather that'd be cool to take the water taxi. And then like I think number 3, which is actually planned in my mind, but it will come true one day, is I want to drive across the country from East Coast to West Coast. As you know, this might shock you that I actually do have that route actually mapped out. I have the South route, so I'd rather go down south rather than go up north. So I go down North Carolina and then like Georgia, and then I start turning, west and going through like Louisiana and then Texas and then like, New Mexico and Arizona, all that, and Las Vegas, and then end up in California. I have it mapped out.
Okay. I see your RV in your future.
Yeah, and then either RV or get a whatever beat up car and then leave the car in LA and then fly home.
Okay, that's pretty dope.
Let me also say one caveat too is now that I don't know if I could do this, but it would sound cool. Is I would actually like to walk across America too.
Excuse me?
Yeah, well, this remember Mike Posner? The singer, Mike Posner. You think you're better than me, or?
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at Mike Posner Across America, he did it and he documented it on like Facebook, and he walked across America, and he even got hospitalized because he got bitten by a rattlesnake. But he he went from East Coast to West Coast on foot, and it took him like 6 months. And he would he would stop and visit people and all kinds of stuff, and he did it. But also he has enough money, I think, to like chill for 6 months and walk across the country. And I think my family would think I'm going MIA if I try to do that. You know what I'm saying?
People you need mad shoes in order to do that, because you're gonna wear out like several pairs of sneakers.
No, he looked like. Have you seen Forrest Gump? Remember when Forrest Gump ran across America?
Mm-hmm.
He did that. Like his beard got really long. He had a walking stick. He literally looked like he did it. That sounds like the dopest idea ever, but I think I might do the driving rather than walk.
First of all, I haven't heard mention of his name since like.
Yeah.
I don't even know what year that song came out, but as soon as you said the name of the song, I was like, oh yeah, I remember him. And I'm gonna have to look up his venture across the U.S. on foot. That's crazy.
He did it like the year right before the pandemic, so it wasn't that old. It was like 2018 or something like that. He did it.
Okay, gotcha.
And I watched it. I randomly followed him on Facebook, and then I just kept on getting his videos, and he'd be like doing like selfie videos, like today y'all just want to check in. He was saying all this like really positive, like I love everybody, all this stuff. It was really uplifting.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's the things I would do post-pandemic. A lot of traveling, a lot of hosting, a lot
Okay.
of togetherness. And
Do I get an invite to the cookout, to the barbecue?
yeah, of course. Man, I'm telling people it's like, man, it's one of those places, man. People just roll up. I don't even know you're there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. BYOB, though. It's like, what you mean? Like, I got nothing for everybody. Everybody, bring your own.
Noted.
BYOB and BYOF too. Bring your own food. You know what I'm saying? Like what?
No, that's a bit much.
Everything I'm about to put every invite potluck style. You know what I'm saying? Like
wow. That would definitely be a crowd control. I think the numbers would be a little bit smaller that way for sure.
What you mean? I gotta bring my own? No, I ain't coming. There you go.
Right. I could see the BYOB, not BYOS. You need to at least provide something, some chips or something, right?
Space. I'm providing space.
I'm good here.
And maybe some music connected to an iPhone.
Oh my gosh. I got space and music here. We have to talk about this. I'm a planner. I can help you plan something now. We'll have to work this out. So
okay. Yeah. BYOF. I'm about to use that. I don't know if that's even been used before, but it is now. All right. This has been great. I think we shared a lot. I think this is actually a really good episode. I'm really proud that I had you on here.
Cool. Thank you for having me on the show, for sure.
Honestly, I think I might hire you as my podcast logistics because I need to work on making more questions ahead of time. But that's for another day, another month when I go through a new season of the podcast and new systems. But for the listeners, this is the part of the show where you get to show love to anyone you want to show love to, and plugs where listeners can follow up with you or whatever you're working on. I don't know, just call plugs. So shout outs and plugs. The floor is yours.
Cool. So for shout outs, I think keep it in line with like the topic for today. I just wanted to shout out my tribe. Like you mentioned that you have your tribe. I definitely have an amazing tribe that has showed up for me in so many different ways throughout the years. Not just related to like different grief that I've experienced, but just showed up to say like, hey, I care. I value our friendship. I'm there for you. Specifically name a few. I have to shout out my mom and my sister because like we're attached at the hip, and I'm a big family person, which if you didn't get a sense of from this episode, I am. I feel like I have like so many different like pockets of friends that have just been amazing additions to my life. And I'm hoping that I've also been able to, be great supports and additions to their lives as well, from like my grad school cohort to actually, I'm going to say the names of our Marco Polo groups because they would know exactly who they are without me specifically listing them. So Pope and Associates, shout out to y'all. Destiny's Child, shout out to y'all. Who am I missing here? This Is Us, shout out to y'all. So you see, I have all these quirky names for my different my groups, my different tribes, which are some are represented on the app Marco Polo. Shout out to In Vogue. I have a group, a Marco Polo group called In Vogue. And like I said, they know exactly who they are within this group. Shout out to my long-term, a few of my long-term high school friends who I consider family now, in which I just reached out to one a couple weeks ago because I was thinking about my dad's passing, because I had a friend who had a parent who passed away. So it brought up some things for me. But I just reached out to him to tell him thank you because he spoke at my dad's funeral. So major shout out to him. Shout out to everyone who is actually focusing on their own self-care and going through their own journey of healing and just being the best them that they can be. So shout out to all of you. So those are my shout outs for today.
I love it. I love those shots for today. And plugs, anything that you want to plug or ways that you feel comfortable people connecting with you.
Yes. In terms of, I guess, plugs, so I guess everything's connected for today. A couple weeks ago, we're in the first week. A couple weeks ago, I actually hosted a virtual discussion that was focused on COVID-19 vaccinations and what lies ahead. And it was really geared towards like my hometown community and looking at like how many people have already gotten the vaccination there, how many COVID-19 cases and deaths, and all the different ways that or access to the vaccine that people have in that area. And just thinking about all the different ways in which we would be moving forward. It was a really rich discussion that is now posted on YouTube. So I said that it was geared towards, some of the data and statistics from that area, but a lot of the practical application of how we move forward and how COVID has impacted us is universal. So if you all are interested and just thinking about like, okay, what does life look like now that we don't, or is recommended that we don't have to wear a mask? I'm probably gonna be wearing my mask until like 2024. Who knows? But but definitely check that out. You can find it on YouTube. Like you can just Google COVID-19. I think it's confidence or hesitancy, and you can Google my name and it should come up there. But definitely want to plug that. And then people can connect with me on all of my social media. I will tell you, Twitter is the one that I don't use quite as. I use Twitter more for like my professional role, but you can definitely follow me there. I use it pretty sporadically related to work, but I believe my handle is KC Bell. If not, just search my name and you'll find me. And then on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, hit me up. Just look for my name and I will follow back if you guys choose to follow me. So
and I'll be sure to put the corresponding links. I wrote it down. I'll put the YouTube link in the show notes and some of those things in the show notes.
Yeah, because you're plugged into all of my socials, so you could just add all that stuff for me.
I'll just do it.
Yeah. But
well, it's been great. I mean, this has been a wonderful episode. I thank you so much. And I already know how I feel about you. And so no need to go into another 10 minutes of singing your praises, which I could, but I do know that you're a high achiever. I know that you're doing a lot, and it takes a lot, to say when you need help, especially when you normally don't ask for help. So I know that feeling, and I definitely empathize, but also celebrate you for, working on it and being a better Kim, because the world needs Kim.
Oh, thank you, Phil.
I was going to say, it just needs Kim. And then no better, nothing, just Kim, just is. That's what I'm going to work on. Like, you don't need a better version of this, just your version, you. So thank you so much. Please, continue to do big things. I'll be looking and watching and making sure that you bring your own food to my next cookout. So thank you.
And my mouth just dropped.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope also you took some lessons, which I know I did. Please share this episode with family and friends. This is definitely these podcasts are lessons for me that I hope will help others that are going through similar situations. And that's why I tap in and ask my friends to share, because they bring such wisdom and knowledge with their experiences. So please share this episode with someone you think needs to hear this today. Also, if you want to feel like living a voicemail, you can call the podcast hotline, which is 571-336-6560. That's 571-336-6560. Sharing positivity is a movement. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity Movement. Thanks for listening.